Okay, so now that we have our project created, let's go and install the Google Maps plugin from Ionic Native, and I'm just gonna pull over onto this screen the Ionic Native plugin, and you can see here that like everything Ionic does, their documentation is top notch, and they tell us exactly what we need to do. So we need to go here and install the Cordova and Ionic Native plugins, and usually it is just a copy paste, but in this example, in this plugin, sorry, we do need to add two variables. The first one is going to be the Android API key we generated, and the iOS one. So let's go and run those right here in our terminal. So I have it actually copied to the clipboard, and we will go here and paste, and that'll go and run. And as soon as that's finished, we will run the Ionic Native Google Maps plugin. We'll pause the video while that installs. Oh, it looks like we didn't need to. Okay, great. So now we have the Cordova plugin and the Ionic Native plugin both installed. So there is one thing we should do before we start, and I like to do this before starting any project, is going to the config.xml and changing the app name. And this is for that display name on your actual app. So we'll do Ionic 3 Google Maps. And if you'll recall, we actually did restrict our key by the bundle identifier. So this ID here is actually your bundle identifier. So we're going to go here and replace that. And now let's just make sure that everything is good to go. We'll do an Ionic serve, and that should bring up our application. Okay, it looks like we're good. This is our tabbed application, and it looks like we don't have any errors, which is great. So now let's go back and let's really begin with the coding part. So how do we actually get how do we go and get the Google Maps plugin into our application so we can see a map? So instead of seeing this, we'll work in the home page or the home tab, and we'll get rid of this and show the actual Google map. Let's get started by going to our home.html, and let's get rid of all of the HTML in here. So what we want to do here is just display the map. So we'll create a div. We'll give it a full height. So we want to say height of 100%. And one thing we're going to do is we're going to add a hash map. And this is going to allow us to reference this div inside of our component. And we'll show how to do that in just a minute. The next thing we're going to need to do is inject the Google Maps provider into our app.module. So we'll go into app.module. Down here in the provider section, we'll say Google Maps. And I'm using IntelliJ. I believe WebStorm does the same thing. So I'm on a Mac, and when I do a command space, it'll actually auto import, and it's pretty good most of the time. Next, let's head to our home component. So we're going to go into the home.ts file, and we want to inject a few things into our constructor, namely the platform and the Google Maps provider. The platform is the same one we're using in our app.component, and this tells us that all of our plugins are ready to use because Google Maps is a plugin. We need Ionic to signal to us that Google Maps and all of our plugins really are ready to use. Otherwise, you're going to run into loading issues where Cordova isn't ready yet. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we've injected both the platform and the Google Maps provider into our component. Next, what I'll do is I'm going to pause the video while I flesh this component out, and then we can go through it step by step and understand what each piece is doing. So I'll be back in just a second. Okay, so we're going to start at the top. And if you recall, in our home.html file, we had this hash map, or really it was a pound map. And what this view child decorator does is it allows us to get a handle on that in the form of an element that we can then call and inject things into. The next thing we did is we added a Google Map field as well as a location field. So this is going to be the actual map that we will eventually inject into our map element, or our div right here. And then we have a location, which is going to represent our current location. Next, we initialize this location object with my current latitude and longitude. And this latitude and longitude object actually comes from the Google Maps plugin. After that, we use this IonView did load lifecycle event that Ionic provides to us, waited for the platform to be ready, so really signals that Google Maps is now ready to be worked with. We extracted the native element out of our map element, and then we went and we created, so we said this.map, which is our Google Map object up here. We go and we create the Google Maps object using the element, which is our div. And then we say, okay, when Google Maps is ready, so once we get an event back that we are ready, we want to create some options, which is the target location and the zoom level, and then we want to move the camera to that location. Now, one of the cool things that Google Maps does is they have this function called one. And what that means is I'm going to only listen to events one time and return to you. So it's not a consistent thing. And it makes sense for things like map.ready because the map should really be initialized once. And we don't need to get that event again. So we're going to run this on the simulator now and see if all this worked out. Okay, so this is the simulator, so the app ran, and our map is pointed to Boston, which is perfect. So that's exactly what we wanted to accomplish. So the next thing we're going to do is we want to add a marker. So it's one of those red things you usually see in Google Maps, and we want to add a marker to represent this location. So let me pause the video and get that going for us. All right, so we've added this add marker function, and we're setting a 2-second timeout. So after we've moved the camera, we set a 2-second timeout, then we call the add marker function. We give the marker a title. We want it to be blue instead of the traditional red. We'll have it drop in as an animation. The position that we give it is just our location. And then after we've added the marker, we go and subscribe to click events and just display an alert. So let's go and pull up our simulator and run this, and we'll see this in action. So the map has loaded, and 2 seconds later, this marker has dropped in. We click on the marker, we get our alert, and we'll also see the My Marker title. So now that we've added a marker, the next step is to add a cluster. And again, a cluster is just a group of these markers, except it'll give us a number, and then we can sort of zoom in and out. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we've done is we've created an array of locations. Now this array of locations is not going to take your standard latitude and longitude objects. It's actually going to take an object with a type of position, and that position has a lat and a long property, so the latitude and the longitude. And that's because the cluster function, the input actually needs to look something like this. And you'll see if we scroll down, we have this function add cluster. And this add cluster takes a bunch of locations, and these are the locations that we're going to feed it. The other thing that we changed is in this IonView did load, instead of calling the add marker function, we're calling the add cluster function. And digging in here, there's not too much going on. We're passing in our location. The one thing that we did is we were customizing the icon. So there's this blue .png. And well, we can just take a look at that real quick. We're going to have this represent our cluster. And after we add the cluster, it returns a promise and gives us back the cluster. We go and we add a click event so that we can respond to events. And we're not doing anything too fancy here. We're just putting out a console.log and an alert. I have this running in the simulator. And you can see here we have six properties, six locations, and that should match up exactly to what we have here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. As I zoom in, you'll notice that we're gonna go and get, now we have three properties here and these two markers over here. We just activated the click event, and this is a cool effect that I like with the clusters. It actually does the whole zoom in. And once we click that 3, we're close enough where it was able to show us all 3 of our locations. Okay, so we've shown how to add a marker, shown how to add a cluster, as well as some click events. I will leave a link to this source code on GitHub. I'll put that in the description. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment below. Until next time.